19 American soldiers lost their lives due to one fateful decision made in seconds. The release of Afghan goat herders during Operation Red Wings set in motion a chain of events that would become one of the deadliest incidents in modern military operations. The acclaimed film Lone Survivor revealed only fragments of this complex story. Hollywood significantly altered reality, transforming a reported 8 to 10 Taliban fighters into more than 200 on screen. This dramatic reshaping raises profound questions about the truth behind the tragedy. Tonight, we separate fact from fiction and explore what really happened on that mountain in Afghanistan, unveiling layers of a story that continues to haunt military history. High in the mountains of Afghanistan, 4 Navy SEALs found themselves confronted with an impossible choice. The team, Marcus Luttrell, Michael Murphy, Danny Dietz, and Matt Axelson, had been dropped into one of the most hostile territories on Earth to execute Operation Red Wings, a mission to locate and neutralize Taliban leader Ahmad Shah. But now, just hours into their operation, they stood face to face with 3 Afghan goat herders who had stumbled upon their position. In an instant, their military objective transformed into a profound ethical dilemma. The situation presented 3 stark options, each with potentially devastating consequences. First, they could detain the herders, but the rugged terrain made this virtually impossible. They lacked both manpower and resources to manage prisoners while maintaining their covert position. Second, they could eliminate the threat permanently, ensuring their position remained secure. Or third, they could release the herders and accept the almost certain compromise of their mission. What the film portrays through terse dialogue and emotional reactions was a complex calculation involving military doctrine and international law, binding directives these elite warriors had internalized throughout their training. The rules of engagement carried severe penalties for violations, including court-martial for killing unarmed civilians, regardless of tactical justification. Every second we debated felt like signing our own death warrant. Luttrell would later reflect, capturing the weight of their mountainside deliberation. The SEALs processed years of training that had cultivated both battlefield efficiency and stringent ethical standards, a cognitive bind where tactical survival and military honor often stood in opposition. Lieutenant Murphy's decision to release the herders adhered to their operational guidelines but inevitably compromised their position. The film reduces this to a quick vote, missing the deeper psychological burden of command where a leader chooses between military success and moral integrity. In that moment, Luttrell wrote, "We became warriors bound by conscience rather than circumstance." Military operations exist within a framework that permits violence while maintaining ethical boundaries. The SEALs were prepared both for combat and to operate within these limitations, creating tension when the imperatives clashed under extreme pressure. These weren't academic considerations, but life-altering decisions that would haunt survivors long after the engagement ended. The consequences arrived swiftly. Within approximately 1 hour of releasing the goat herders, the SEALs found themselves surrounded by an estimated 80 to 100 Taliban fighters. The ambush was precise and overwhelming, the direct result of their ethical decision. the firefight claimed the lives of Murphy, Dietz, and Axelson, leaving Luttrell as the lone survivor of an operation compromised by adherence to rules designed for conventional warfare. This mountainside confrontation represents a fundamental challenge of modern military engagement. When facing an enemy unbounded by the same conventions, how does a military force maintain ethical standards without sacrificing tactical advantage? The dilemma reflected deeper questions about warfare in the 21st century, where conventional forces operate against unconventional enemies within frameworks designed for different conditions. The broader implications extended beyond immediate survival. These rules were designed to protect civilian populations and maintain international legitimacy for military operations. Violations can damage diplomatic relationships, inflame local resistance, and undermine broader objectives. As Taliban fighters closed in, the SEALs discovered their already dire situation was further complicated by technical failures. Their communications equipment was severely compromised. Murphy's desperate attempt to reach higher command became one of the most poignant acts of heroism in the engagement, necessitated by systemic failures that Hollywood largely glosses over. The mountainous terrain of Afghanistan became a deadly trap for the SEAL team caught in Operation Red Wings, not simply because of enemy action, but because of fundamental communication failures that lone survivor largely ignores. When Lieutenant Murphy exposed himself to enemy fire on that ridge, his desperate dash wasn't just an act of heroism. It was the inevitable consequence of a mission plagued by technical shortcomings and planning oversights that placed elite operators in an untenable position with inadequate means to call for help. Berg's film presents communication difficulties as merely an unfortunate side effect of the rugged landscape. A few brief scenes show frustrated operators unable to make contact, suggesting bad luck rather than systemic failure. The reality reveals a troubling picture of military operations compromised by equipment unsuited to the environment and tactical protocols that fell short of standard procedure. The mission's communications were crippled by both the harsh terrain and insufficient backup systems. The SEAL team deployed with SATCOM equipment fundamentally ill-equipped for the mission parameters. Military planners should have recognized that the steep mountain valleys would create significant obstacles for satellite transmission, a critical oversight that effectively isolated the four-man team once the operation began. This created a crumbling bridge between the team and their support structure, leaving them stranded with no reliable way to request assistance when they needed it most. Murphy's desperate sprint wasn't just an isolated act of courage. It was a glaring symptom of a larger failure in military planning. Special operations forces typically deploy with multiple overlapping communication systems precisely because primary systems often fail in challenging environments. The mission's planners failed to implement these basic safeguards, leaving the team without backup options when their primary communication channels proved unreliable. The absence of a communications relay system, equipment that could have maintained contact despite the challenging topography, represents another critical failure in the mission's execution. Such systems are designed specifically for operations in radio-compromised environments like Afghanistan's Hindu Kush Mountains. Without this essential link to command and support elements, the team operated in an information vacuum that severely limited their tactical options once compromised. Military doctrine emphasizes varying transmission points to prevent pattern recognition by opposing forces, a fundamental practice inexplicably abandoned during this operation. The repeated use of the same location to establish communications violated basic fieldcraft principles and potentially revealed their position to enemy observers long before the goat herder encounter. When Murphy finally reached higher command during his fateful transmission attempt, his message was cut short, leaving headquarters with incomplete information about the team's situation and precise position. This fragmented communication had catastrophic consequences for both the SEAL team and the subsequent rescue operation. Command decisions were made based on partial information, especially lethal when attempting high-risk extractions. The cascading effect of these failures reached its devastating conclusion when the rescue helicopter arrived without comprehensive knowledge of the tactical situation. The CH-47 Chinook, carrying 16 special operators, approached without complete intelligence about enemy positions or strength. This information gap, a direct result of the fragmented communications, left the aircraft vulnerable to the RPG attack that ultimately brought it down. What Lone Survivor presents as a narrative of courage against impossible odds obscures these systemic failures. The film's focus on individual heroism diverts attention from the institutional shortcomings that necessitated such extreme acts of bravery. By glossing over these technical and tactical shortcomings, the film missed an opportunity to spark important conversations about military preparedness and the true cost of operational negligence. Beyond the institutional failures that endangered Luttrell lurked an unexpected force for his salvation, a moral code predating both American military presence and even Islam itself. While crawling through the rugged Afghan mountains, his body broken and alone, Luttrell's fate no longer rested with superior firepower or tactical protocols, but with strangers bound by an ancient ethical framework. The Pashtunwali code, particularly its principle of Nanawatai, or sanctuary, would prove more powerful than modern warfare in determining whether this American soldier would survive another day in hostile territory. When Mohammed Gulab and his fellow villagers discovered the severely wounded Navy SEAL, they faced an impossible choice that the film Lone Survivor only partially illuminates. Their decision to shelter Luttrell represented the fulfillment of a sacred cultural obligation dating back over 2 millennia, a code as ancient and unyielding as the rugged mountains themselves. Nanawatai demanded they provide protection to anyone seeking refuge, regardless of nationality, religion, or the dangers such protection might invite. The depth of this commitment becomes evident when examining the extraordinary risks the villagers accepted. When Taliban fighters arrived demanding Luttrell's surrender, they promised violent retribution against the entire community. Standing firm against these threats required courage beyond measure, especially considering the villagers had no guarantee American forces would ever reach them in time. Their defiance honored a principle that formed the cornerstone of their cultural identity. The cinematic portrayal presents Gulab as a sympathetic figure, but fails to capture the profound complexity of his actions. His adherence to Pashtunwali represented a multi-layered decision shaped by personal values, community expectations, and cultural imperatives that had governed his ancestors for countless generations. The film reduces this rich cultural context to a simplistic moral choice, missing the opportunity to explore how traditional values can sometimes create unexpected bridges between ostensibly opposing forces in modern conflicts. His act of sanctuary was not without profound personal cost. The village endured sustained Taliban retribution that continued long after Luttrell returned safely to American soil. Homes were destroyed, livelihoods shattered, and families torn apart, all consequences stemming from their unwavering commitment to honor the principles of Pashtunwali in protecting a stranger from a foreign land. For Gulab personally, the aftermath proved devastating. His decision to shelter Luttrell and actively facilitate his rescue by sending runners with a handwritten note to the nearest American base marked him as a particular target for Taliban vengeance. The subsequent years saw him forced to relocate his family multiple times as death threats continued unabated. Each move meant abandoning property, community connections, and economic opportunities. By 2015, almost a decade after these events, Gulab finally received asylum in the United States, having lost nearly everything: his home, his standing in his community, and his ability to sustain his family in his homeland. This gap between cinematic narrative and lived reality reveals something profound about how we process and remember complex international events. The focus on American heroism, while compelling and partly legitimate, sidelines the Afghan civilians whose courage proved equally decisive in the outcome. Their story exists at the intersection of cultural tradition, individual moral agency, and the brutal realities of being caught between powerful opposing forces. The relationship between Luttrell and Gulab demonstrates how human connections can transcend the artificial boundaries of conflict. In a war defined largely by cultural misunderstandings and mutual suspicion, their unlikely alliance offers a rare counterexample, one where ancient principles of honor created common ground between individuals technically positioned as enemies. This element suggests possibilities for cross-cultural understanding that transcend political and military dimensions of international conflicts. In the years since that fateful mission, Marcus Luttrell's words echo with haunting clarity. "I died on that mountain too. I left a part of myself up there." His raw admission reveals psychological wounds that persist long after physical recovery, wounds the film barely depicts. The aftermath of Operation Red Wings transformed military doctrine and challenged engagement strategies in complex cultural landscapes. What price do we pay when orders clash with morality? The heroism displayed in those mountains carries profound meaning beyond Hollywood's portrayal, living on in our understanding of warfare's true cost and the human beings forever changed by impossible choices.